Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles DeVance. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of the DREAMERSPRO show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And today we got some drama for y'all. But before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and sub to the channel. So I'm just actually hipping myself up to this story, so bear with me. But I'm sure some of you have heard with this situation, the drama surrounding Deion Sanders, a person that we've discussed quite a bit on our channel. We were, super hyped for him when he started in Boulder, Colorado, with the Buffaloes, and he got off to a sensational start. But obviously, his season didn't end the way it started. But nevertheless, he brought a lot of excitement to college football to the point where people that would never pay attention to the sport were. I defended him when people were attacking him, making personal attacks. Some of the stuff that Jason Whitlock was saying, I was definitely defending him there because I thought a lot of those comments were out of bounds, right? But ever since then, I haven't been really following what's been happening with Deion Sanders because I'm not really a football fan, number one, let alone a collegiate sports fan. I'm usually more focused on the NBA. That's really where my interest lies, right? But apparently there's been some drama that's been taking place around Deion Sanders, and the gist of it is the following. There's a particular reporter who I don't know who had been saying some unsavory things about Deion Sanders, and Deion didn't like it. So there was this clip of him trying to ask Deion Sanders a question that I saw, where Deion was just like, he looked at him and he's like, "Bro, why do you do this? Why do you do this?" And he was like, "Why do you do it?" And they had this long back and forth where Deion just essentially said, "Look, I'm not going to answer your question. I'm not going to deal with you because of some of the things that you do, some of the things that you say." And that was that, right? And he decided not to. And then Paul Finebaum, I hope I got his name right. I'm just going to say Paul because it's difficult to pronounce his name. He went out on, Get Up yesterday, and he made some comments about Deion, right? Some pretty strong comments, but nevertheless, he was giving his views, right? And then people started weighing in on it. Matt Barnes reacted to what he had to say on Instagram. I saw the post that he put up. So what happened? Today, Stephen A. Smith invites him on, back to ESPN First Take. And on today's show, on Wednesdays, as you guys know, Chris Mad Dog Russo makes his weekly appearance. So it was Paul, Chris Mad Dog Russo, Stephen A. Smith, and Molly Karam, right? And they start off the segment by highlighting the comments that Deion Sanders made in response to Paul. So they start that off, and then Paul starts saying what he says, and we're going to play some of what he said. And then the person that was supposed to speak subsequently was Chris Mad Dog Russo. So as Chris Mad Dog Russo starts giving his viewpoint, Molly Karam starts to interject, because he was basically saying, "Look, I don't understand why we gave Deion Sanders all of this attention. They gave him the Sportsman of the Year. I think Sports Illustrated gave him the Sports Man of the Year." He was like, "How can we do that? He didn't have his season didn't end well." And then Molly Karam started pushing back on him. And then him and Molly got into this little heated argument. And then Stephen A. Smith chimed in, which brought a whole different layer to this conversation that we're going to touch on as well, because I think it's going to be very, very interesting. So what we'd like to do now is like to play this exchange from you. It's a little bit lengthy, but I think it's all the information in there is pertinent to this particular subject matter. So I want you guys to listen to it in its entirety, and then we're going to come back and really get into the meat and potatoes of the show. Take a listen to that there.
Listen, he wasn't reacting to what I said that you just got through playing. I didn't hear anything in Prime's response about whether or not he was a bully or a hypocrite or why he won't let certain people ask questions. He was talking about something I said 5 or 6 weeks ago about the University of Colorado really being an irrelevant program without him, which was a compliment. So Molly, it didn't mean very much to me because it was a fairly irrelevant reaction. He did say something that I agree with. He called me a dying breed in the profession, which I'm proud of because I really do believe that the media should be treated with respect and not have selective persecution like he is using out there, not only with this reporter from Denver, but other reporters as well.
A couple of things here. First off, and we're as guilty as anybody, the whole world, because Colorado won at TCU last year, went gaga over Deion. And if you go look at the finished product, that product was a disaster. They didn't make a bowl game. They went over 500. And Sports Illustrated made him the Sportsman of the Year. What? Sportsman of the Year for a team that goes 5-6 or 5. How was he?
He brought a lot of new eyeballs to college
football? But he's
football.
not the Sportsman of the Year.
I'm just saying, he's a superstar. He brought a lot of new eyeballs to college
end of the day,
football.
Molly,
His son's the star quarterback.
All right. At the end of the day, what was the final record?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, to start it off, it was high. You had all celebrities there at the games.
I get it, and I understand there was some juice there, and I watched Colorado USC bet them and everything else, wanted to support them. But the end result was not very pretty. So that's number one. You got to be fair. I mean, they didn't even finish 500. Yeah. And he was on the cover of, he was the Sportsman of the Year. I mean, how in the world did anybody think last year that the Sportsman of the Year was...
Well, you heard him. Everyone's always talking about him. You heard him.
Listen, he came in the studio last March. I had a great interview with him. I've been a big fan. He's a great baseball player. I get it. But hold on now. Anytime you start attacking the media and telling the media you can't ask a question, this is a columnist. This is not some guy, from the Fort Collins Times. This is the Denver Post. It's a huge paper. You're going to come up small when you start saying that. You can come to our games and you can be around, but you can't ask the head coach a question? I mean, come on. I mean, Deion's got to be bigger than that. I mean, geez, you're afraid to answer a question? And I don't know anything about the reporter. So, I mean, is he taking unnecessary shots? I can't answer that. I'm not out there.
They say he's taking unnecessary shots. They say that it's gotten personal. They say that, they brought up, racial insensitivity when it comes to him in terms of his reporting and his words on.
But if that's the case, Steve,
family, that's what they say.
Well, then kick him out of the program entirely. Mm-hmm. He's still allowed to go to the games, go all the practices. If he's been that detrimental, he's not allowed on Colorado campus. Mm-hmm. Do it that way, almost like he's doing it halfway. You got to answer the questions from the reporter. It's one question a week, and if you don't answer it, you look small.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of people think right now.
Well,
about
let me take it from here. Deion Sanders is a friend of mine. I've known him for decades. Got a lot of love for him, and I know a lot of things about him that the average person doesn't know, because I'm one of the people he trusts enough to communicate with on that level. Having said that, I'll be right here on national television, and you can put Paul Finebaum up on the screen as well, please, so I can see him. He's wrong. He's wrong about Paul Finebaum. Let me tell you why he's wrong about Paul Finebaum. Because that same man that's on that screen right now that Deion Sanders was talking about is the same Paul Finebaum that has praised Deion Sanders on many, many occasions, including last year, talking about the attention that he brought to college football, how much it was much needed, how the scarcity of black coaches in the history of college football, what he did to elevate the profile of African Americans and what they could do in the sport of college football. The person who came to primetime Deion Sanders' defense was Paul Finebaum. And so when Deion Sanders, who's very popular for telling you, bring your receipts, know what you're talking about, do your homework, et cetera, it may have behooved him to do his homework on Paul Finebaum when it comes to him. Because even though Paul Finebaum was critical of him the other day and last week, for most of last year, Paul Finebaum was praising him. Paul Finebaum talked about how he deserved the job at Florida State. Paul Finebaum talked about how it would be great if he were in the SEC and he had a hold of a better program as opposed to being in Boulder, Colorado. So as much as I love my brother Deion Sanders, and he is my brother, and I love him to death, I also love Paul Finebaum, all right? And I know that Paul Finebaum has come to his defense on many occasions. So in that regard, as it pertains to what Deion had to say about Paul Finebaum specifically, respectfully, you're wrong. He's wrong about that. Now, having said all of that, here's what I would say to you, Doggy, and everybody else. Deion Sanders got to win football games. That's true. Can't lose 6 straight. Can't lose 8 of your last 9 games. Can't go 4-8 and think that you're not going to get criticism, especially when you started off the season beating TCU, who was the national runner-up at the time, and then you looked at the reporters and said, do you believe?
So you heard what they said there. You heard what Paul Finebaum had to say. You heard what Chris Mad Dog Russo had to say, and you heard what Stephen A. Smith had to say. You heard the interaction between Mad Dog and Molly Karam. Molly Karam has this habit of interrupting people. It's quite interesting. I think Molly thinks that people tune in to hear her views on the show, which is interesting. She talked like as if we're here to listen to her, but really we're here to listen to the guests. But nevertheless, that's her show and that's their thing. So they kind of man the ship the way that they want to, and it works because they have the #1 sports show. So obviously they know what they're doing. I'm gonna get to the first part. I'll get to Stephen A. Smith's part last. Look, Chris Mad Dog Russo, I believe, was speaking from a vantage point of not necessarily a Deion Sanders supporter, but maybe someone without a horse in the race. They were listening to it. Maybe they're following the story, but maybe not necessarily they're a fan. And they're like, look, Deion brought a lot of excitement and all of that, but at the same time, he didn't win at the level he was supposed to, right? So I think he was speaking from that vantage point. I don't think that a staunch Deion Sanders supporter would have taken a position that Chris Mad Dog Russo had to make. In the case of Paul Finebaum, look, as Stephen A. Smith alluded, he's been a supporter of Deion Sanders, right? So it doesn't mean that just because you support somebody, you need to remain 100% supportive of them no matter what they do. Paul strikes me as someone that is a straight shooter, is going to call things like he sees it. That's how he's always been every time I've seen him discuss sports. So I don't think there's anything new here. I think the difference is that we're dealing with a very high profile individual in Deion Sanders, right? So I think there's that dichotomy that exists within this situation. In the case of Stephen A. Smith, however, this is the part that I really want to anchor in on right now, because I was reading through some of the comments that people were leaving under that clip that we just played for you guys. And a lot of people were basically saying that, look, Stephen A. Smith is a clown, right? This is what they were saying. He's a clown for taking a position that he took. Now, as somebody that was born and raised in the United States, let me give you guys let me give you guys what's not being said in the undertones here. The undertones are the following. Okay, you have Deion Sanders, who's a black man, having a back and forth with Paul Finebaum, who's a white guy, and Deion Sanders is in a situation with this, I'm assuming, white reporter. So you have that element within this entire situation that's there, right? So when you look at Stephen A. Smith, who's the only black gentleman on the panel, some blacks, not all, some blacks would say, "Hey, look, man, you need to defend Deion in this particular situation, right?" But Stephen A. Smith, I personally believe, was put in a difficult spot, and I'm gonna tell you why. If Stephen A. Smith excuses Deion Sanders' behavior, then he will come off as a hypocrite, right? Stephen A. Smith, I believe in this particular instance here, his first duty was to defend his contemporaries, which in this case is the media. And I think that he brought on Paul Finebaum to speak his piece, say what he has to say. And then Stephen A. Smith would now kind of play both sides, or really rather speak for both sides. As a Deion Sanders supporter, as a friend of his, as he said, he defended him when it came to the program that he inherited that went 1-11 the year prior. So for the fact that Deion Sanders won even 2, 3, 4 games, which was totally unexpected, the season was a success from that standpoint, and that's the point that he highlighted. That's what we were talking about earlier this year when we were talking about Deion Sanders. But on the other hand, the reason he had to call out Deion for not speaking to the press and not knowing much about what Paul Finebaum has said about him in the past is because I have heard Stephen A. Smith be critical on Greg Popovich. Stephen A. Smith has called out Greg Popovich for his acerbic behavior towards the media. In certain cases, he's just downright rude and nasty to media members. And he's called him out for his dismissive attitude towards media members and not speaking to people in the media. He's done it. I've seen him do it on ESPN. So if he's going to do it to Greg Popovich, he's going to have to do it for Deion Sanders. Now, maybe some people listening to this clip that we just played, or maybe just just started following the situation, may not know that Stephen A. Smith has held Greg Popovich's feet to the fire, but he has. And I think that he was doing the best job he could at being fair. You guys know I'm not a fan of Stephen A. Smith at all, right? At all. But I got to call it down the line. I got to call what I see. If I see something and I interpret it a particular way, it's my duty to share my views with you in the way that I feel. And then it's up to people of whether or not they want to agree with me or disagree with me, right? But to me, I think the undertone here is the fact that Deion is a black guy. You have Paul Finebaum, who's a white guy. You have the reporter, who I think is a white guy, so you have that element. On the surface level, it's just a coach, refusing to speak to the media. But the undertones of it, that's really what's there. Now, to me, look, what do I think about Deion deciding not to speak to the media? I would be lying to you if I said I knew the rule book on how players and coaches are supposed to conduct themselves with the media. I don't know. Right? I don't know. It's not something I ever paid attention to in terms of the rules of engagement of how it works. My understanding is you are meant to talk to the media, at least from a player standpoint. And I think that if you don't talk to the media in certain instances, you may be fined. I don't know. In the NBA, there are cases where players, if they had a bad game or they suffered a tough loss, there are cases where some people don't speak to the media. I've seen that on many occasions. So I don't know what the precedence is that exists within college football and all that. I don't know that. But it seems like, based on the things that they were saying, I'm talking about Paul, Chris Mad Dog Russo, and Stephen A. Smith, it seems as if that you're meant to speak to the media. In the case of Deion, he's put in a difficult situation because he doesn't want to give any he doesn't want to assist a guy that has been saying nasty things about him, at least according to what he's been saying. I don't know what the guy's been saying about him. So by Deion Sanders giving him quotes and sound bites, he's actually helping him in the newspaper he works for. But Chris Mad Dog Russo and others are like, you got to put on your big boy pants because that's part of the game. You're meant to answer questions from the media. So I don't really have the answer here. I really don't have the answers here. I don't know the governing bodies over this particular matter. I don't know if Deion Sanders will be fine. I don't know any of that whatsoever. What I did think was interesting, however, was the dispute between Molly and Chris Mad Dog, because Molly felt like, I guess, Chris was going too hard. And to me, what I think is needed is that Chris should be able to express himself. And I think that the person that disagrees with him should be able to express themselves. Well, don't interrupt him and say, hey, look, you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say this. He has a right to give his views. That's why you invited him on the show, right? You invited him on the show to give his opinion. So I didn't like the fact that she was interrupting him there. But look, what I want to know from the audience, what's your takeaway from this entire situation here? Whose side are you on? Are you on the reporter's side? Are you on Deion Sanders' side? Are you with Stephen A. Smith against him? Are you siding with Molly? Are you siding with Chris Mad Dog? What do you think about the role that Paul Finebaum had to play in all of this? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. We catch you guys on the next show.